All right, we're live. Can you wave? Say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
I've got my little special guest with me again today. And who do you have with you, Lillian?
Lammy, my favorite cuddler, she's the best cuddler in the whole wide world.
She's the best cuddler in the whole wide world, huh? All right, well, are we going to read a story?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you know what story we're going to read? No? Okay, well, I'll have to tell you. We are going to read God to the Rescue. And this is the story. Do you know who that is in the picture? Who's that? Anybody know? You don't have to raise your hand. Do you know? Who is it?
It's Moses.
Moses. How do you know it's Moses?
Because I know this story.
You know the story. Is it because there's a big burning bush right next to him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's read about Moses. And just like I did yesterday, I'll read it and then I'll turn it around so that you can see the pictures. So, this is God to the Rescue from Exodus chapters 3 through 13. All right. Joseph and his brothers grew old and died, but their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule, but this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph, and he didn't like God's people. He made them into his slaves and beat them and made them work harder and harder. God's people cried out to God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people. He would find a way to set them free. One day, Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves weren't burning up. He took a closer look. "Moses!" boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. The bush was talking to him. "I have heard my people's cries," God said. "I have seen their tears, so I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go free." Moses was afraid, but God said, "I will be with you." Here's the picture of the burning bush. So Moses went to Pharaoh. "Pharaoh," Moses began, God, said Pharaoh. "Never heard of him." Moses kept going. "God says, let his people go free." "Why should I?" Pharaoh said. "Don't want to, won't." So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water. That sounds icky, doesn't it? But still, Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping. In your bed frogs, in your hair frogs, in your soup frogs, all over everywhere frogs. "Make them go away!" Pharaoh screamed. "Then your people can go." So God took the frogs away. But Pharaoh changed his mind. "You can't go," he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats. But still Pharaoh said no. So then God sent swarms of flies. Flies, buzzing in your eyes, flies. And after that, sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstones and a storm of locusts. Then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation and everything was coming undone, falling back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. And you can see in the pictures there's some frogs hopping around and some gnats and some flies and all sorts of things. But each time Pharaoh said, "Make it stop, and then I'll let them go." And each time when God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "Actually, no, you can't go." Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, "Obey God, or he will have to send the worst thing of all." Pharaoh just laughed. Ha ha ha. So God said the oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe. God told his people to take their best lamb, to kill it, and to put some of its blood on their front doors. When God passes over your house, Moses explained, God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you. That night, it was just as God had said. Suddenly, piercing the darkness, echoing down the corridors of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. Get out, Pharaoh shouted. Just go. And here you can see a picture of the Pharaoh. And so that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever and ever. And there's the picture of the people leaving Egypt.
I think next story, or you should read one. And
The next story I should read is what? What did you think of the story?
I loved it.
You loved it. Well, that's good. Do you have any questions about the story?
Like, why did each time Pharaoh change his mind when he says, stop the God and I will let the people go? And
Why did Pharaoh change his mind every time? That is a really tough question that even a lot of theologians argue over, actually. So that's a really big thing for a 4-year-old to pick up on. Why did Pharaoh say no every time? Well, Pharaoh was stubborn. You're not ever stubborn, are you? And Pharaoh was trying to prove that he was more powerful than God. Yeah, see, each of the plagues, the things that God sent, they represented things that the Egyptians worshipped in a way. The Egyptians thought that there were other gods that were in charge of all those things, like the frogs in the river, and God was showing that he was more powerful than any of the gods that the Egyptians believed in. And that was part of it.
I have a question for the first picture.
You have another question? What's your other question? If
Did
anyone else has a question, you can leave it in the comments. You don't have to raise your hand, Lillian. You can just ask a question.
Why did God ask Moses to save the people?
Why did God choose Moses? Well, that's a very good question. You might have to ask God that question when we get to heaven. But you know what the Bible tells us? The Bible tells us that God uses lots of people who we would least expect for him to use.
Okay.
Yeah. And God looks at the inside. He looks at what's in our hearts.
Oh.
And not just at the outside. That's another thing that the Bible tells us. He looks at what's in our hearts, and he uses people even when we think that they wouldn't be very good leaders or that they don't have very many skills. God chooses to use people in the most unexpected of ways. So when you get to heaven, you can ask God why he chose Moses.
Why?
Those are some good questions coming from my little 4-year-old brain here. But we're going to wrap up our story time. And don't forget, thanks for watching. If you're watching either live or on the replay, good to see you. Hi, Kathy. Good afternoon. We'll be back at 1 o'clock tomorrow. So hopefully you catch church on the live stream tomorrow. And then you can tune in at 1 for our next story. And you'll find out what happens next in God's rescue story of humanity from the Jesus Storybook Bible. I love this book. I think it does a really great job of presenting the material to the kiddos. And you're enjoying it too, aren't you, Lillian? Are you having fun helping Mommy out with these?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you tomorrow.
In the last few days that you were at church doing it, I've been watching it.
Oh, you've been watching it when I did it at church? Yeah. All right, well, we'll do more of that next week. But for now, you get to help me out. All right, say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, but I have one more thing.
Oh, you have one more thing? What's your one more thing?
So...
All right, we're going to... we'll finish up. Okay. Bye. Thanks for watching.